The year is 1920. In the rugged hills of Gansu province, a region that now borders Ningxia, life moved at the rhythm of the seasons. This was the Loess Plateau, a vast expanse of yellow, silty soil, built up over thousands of years by the wind. The hills rolled like waves frozen in time with deposits of sediment, sometimes hundreds of meters deep. For the people who lived here, this soil was both home and hazard. For over 4,500 years, generations had carved their homes directly into the Loess Hills. These cave dwellings, called yaodongs, were marvels of practicality. They stayed warm in winter, cool in summer, and required almost no construction materials besides the earth itself. Families, farmers, and local traders, including large communities of Hui Muslims, had made these caves a way of life. But beneath their feet, the fine, loosely packed Loess soil carried a hidden danger. In an earthquake, it could become deadly, flowing like water and swallowing anything in its path. The region was politically isolated. China was in the grip of the warlord era, with central authority weak and fragmented. The local population had little access to outside aid, and communications were slow. Villagers went about their daily lives unaware that the ground beneath them was a ticking time bomb. December 16, 1920 began like any other winter day. Snow dusted the hills and the air was bitterly cold. Families prepared their evening meals, children played near the cave entrances, and traders returned from the sparse local markets. By early evening, people were settling in for the night. They had no warning of the destruction to come, no sign that their world was about to be reshaped in an instant. In the quiet, cold night of Haiyuan County, the earth was silently storing energy. The mountains seemed eternal, the caves secure, and the snow still. Few could imagine that in just hours the ground would erupt in one of the deadliest earthquakes in human history, a force so powerful it would literally move mountains and bury entire communities. At just after 7:05 in the evening on December 16, 1920, the earth roared to life. The Haiyuan Fault, a major structure along the edge of the Tibetan Plateau, ruptured with immense force. The earthquake released a magnitude estimated today at 7.8 to 7.9, striking at a shallow depth that amplified the destruction at the surface. The shaking was so intense that it reached the maximum level on the intensity scale: total destruction. For residents of Haiyuan, Longdu, and Huining, the night became a nightmare of collapsing homes and cracking earth. Entire villages were leveled in moments. In 14 counties, more than 70% of structures were destroyed. Families inside their yaodongs were trapped as ceilings caved in and walls crumbled. The sound of splitting earth and falling stone echoed through the hills, leaving survivors disoriented in a darkness broken only by the cold winter moon. The rupture extended for approximately 237 kilometers, or nearly 147 miles. In some areas, the ground shifted horizontally by over 6 meters, tearing roads, bridges, and rivers apart. Even hundreds of kilometers away, tremors caused lakes to slosh and rivers to change course. Reports noted the shaking could be felt as far away as Qinghai province, with some distant observers in Norway detecting unusual movements in large bodies of water. As the initial quake subsided, stunned survivors realized the destruction was only part of the horror. Buildings were pulverized, roads split open, and communication lines severed. Many who survived the collapse of their homes would soon confront another, more terrifying phenomenon. The mountains themselves were starting to move. The shaking was only the beginning. The fragile hills of the Loess Plateau, weakened by centuries of wind-blown sediment, began to behave like a liquid under the force of the earthquake. Entire slopes lost stability, and massive landslides surged down the valleys at terrifying speed. Survivors described it as mountains walking, with the soil and rock flowing as if it were water. The quake triggered more than 675 major landslides and tens of thousands of smaller ones. Entire villages were swallowed in an instant. In Shiji County, the settlement of Sujayahe disappeared beneath a river of Loess, leaving no survivors. Rivers were dammed, creating dozens of new lakes overnight, while other waterways carved entirely new paths through the altered terrain. The destruction of the landscape was widespread and unpredictable. Valleys were buried under tens of meters of earth. Hillsides that had stood for centuries vanished, replaced by chaotic piles of soil and debris. Survivors recalled rivers of mud rushing past in the dead of night, sweeping away homes, livestock, and everything in their path. The scale of human loss from these landslides alone was staggering. Modern studies estimate that over 32,500 people died directly due to these flows of earth. Combined with the collapse of the cave dwellings, the earthquake became one of the deadliest landslide events in recorded history. The mountains themselves had become a silent, unstoppable killer, reshaping the region in ways that would last for generations. For those who survived the initial quake and the terrifying landslides, a new danger emerged: exposure to the harsh winter. The earthquake struck in mid-December, when temperatures in Gansu and Ningxia regularly fell well below freezing. With homes destroyed and food supplies buried or swept away, thousands faced starvation and hypothermia in the days that followed. Aftershocks continued relentlessly for years, leaving people too afraid to rebuild permanent homes. Even temporary shelters offered little protection from the bitter cold, and families struggled to find clean water as rivers had shifted or been blocked by debris. The landscape itself had become alien. Familiar roads, bridges, and landmarks were gone, making travel and communication nearly impossible. In addition to natural hazards, social order broke down. Banditry and theft increased as desperate survivors searched for food and shelter. Medical care was virtually non-existent, and disease spread in overcrowded exposed camps. Relief efforts from the government were minimal due to the ongoing civil strife of the warlord era, leaving survivors largely on their own in a frozen, fractured environment. The aftermath revealed a grim truth. Even after the shaking stopped, the earthquake's impact continued to claim lives. The combination of cold, hunger, and isolation made survival a daily struggle. In many areas, death from exposure and starvation rivaled the immediate toll of the quake itself, extending the human tragedy far beyond the initial event. The Haiyuan earthquake was not just a tragedy of circumstance. It was a perfect example of how geology and human settlement can combine for catastrophic effect. The quake occurred along the Haiyuan Fault, part of a complex network of faults at the edge of the Tibetan Plateau. This region is gradually compressed and deformed by the slow but immense collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates, a process that built the Himalayas and continues to release energy in violent earthquakes. The lowest soil that dominated the landscape amplified the destruction. While dense enough to support cave dwellings, the fine, loosely packed sediment had almost no resistance to horizontal shaking. When the quake struck, the soil lost its cohesion and flowed downhill, a process similar to soil liquefaction. The very material that had provided shelter for thousands of years became a deadly agent of destruction. The earthquake's death toll remains one of the highest ever recorded. Estimates range from 234,000 to 273,400 lives lost. Haiyuan County alone accounted for over 73,000 deaths, more than half of its population at the time. By any measure, it ranks as the second deadliest earthquake of the 20th century, surpassed only by the Tangshan earthquake of 1976. Despite the enormity of the disaster, it remained largely unknown outside China for decades. Political instability, geographic isolation, and the sheer scale of the event kept news from spreading widely. Today, however, the Haiyuan earthquake serves as a critical case study. Scientists study the lowest landslides and fault mechanics to better predict future disasters, particularly in regions with similar soil and tectonic conditions. The event is remembered as the day the mountains walked. Entire landscapes were reshaped and hundreds of thousands of lives were lost in an instant. It is a stark reminder of how local geology, extreme weather, and human settlement patterns can combine to create disasters of almost an unimaginable scale. The 1920 Haiyuan earthquake is more than history. It is a lesson for the present, a testament to the destructive power hidden beneath the earth beneath our feet,